Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you that's very different than usual on my channel because I'm going to be talking about comic books. This isn't a comic book channel, it's a gaming channel, but I read a lot of comic books. But I wanted to do this because I think I found something unusual in a series of comic books, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that nobody else has noticed or found before. Or at least my Google Foo seems to have failed me. I think I may have figured something out about these strange comics that nobody else did. So instead of posting it on the internet, I'm making a video and posting it on the internet. I don't know how that goes, but the comics in question are The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. You're probably most familiar with the movie that these are based on, and if that's true, I feel sorry for you, because the movie and the comic books have pretty much nothing in common except for one of the characters and the title. If you expect to understand what's going on or what I'm talking about based on the movie, you're really not gonna get it. I'll be referencing all of the books, these a little bit less because these are the end of the series and I don't want to spoil anything for you. But the idea is, I think I've discovered the secret to the world that they live in. The characters in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen live in a very unusual world where all books, where all literature, where all fictional characters are simultaneously real at once, even conflicting ones. You have 1950s adventure and you have 1950s Big Brother existing in the same time. You have Martian invasion, you have spiritual stuff, you have characters that are at odds with each other, and all of their stories are simultaneously real, and it's a big mess and it never really explained that. My idea is that all of the characters actually live in a giant library and they're kind of personified versions of themselves, and that's the reason why all things are simultaneously real, and why as you read through the comic book series it moves from like 1900s literature to 1930s serials, 1950s adventure to 2000 level stuff, because books are being removed and added to the library kind of as they come in and out of favor, and that's when characters die. But they're very literally in a library and do occasionally jump out of the pages, which is my idea, and I think that I can prove it today. One piece of evidence you should probably be familiar with is that these books are all written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Kevin O'Neill. You can see Alan Moore right here. He's a very strange individual with lots of strange beliefs, but one of those beliefs is that you can kind of write things into reality, which I'll reference later. Let's go with the very first book here, and I'll give you an example. If I flip to any kind of random page on this book, you can see it's a very early, like 1900s-ish kind of adventure story, and it fits that theme. But then as you move forward, you get more into the later 1900s, and it just changes as it goes out very slightly. So in these books, when we move into the 1970s, we're starting to see superheroes take over and become more popular, but they're all literally real in this particular story. Same kind of thing where in this book, which is largely based in the 50s, you will see some stuff. I can't really show you the Big Brother stuff, it's a little bit bad for YouTube, but you'll see they start to become 1950s serial adventures, but also in the context of this story, they are very, very real. So while those are interesting and it's a fan theory, where do you give the weight to this? Where's the reality? Well, that's in the big boy here, the very big, difficult to read book. And if you read this book throughout, it's a comic book all the way throughout until you hit the comics here, but until you hit the end section, then it becomes literally literature. 3 pages thick, tons and tons. It took me longer to read the appendix than it did to read the actual book, but all of the meat of it is in the appendix. One of the first things that we will see here in the appendix is a story, as recorded by the characters as being very real. I'm going to try to read this upside down, of Miss A.L., and that is not an inverse color. That's her actual color. She is paraffin white, and her eyes are black because she fell into a hole in the world, a black hole that nobody could understand or explain, and then crawled back out kind of reversed, kind of flipped in and out, speaking gibberish, difficult to understand. On the next page, I have it bookmarked, we'll see a picture of the hole and the men exploring it. All of this story that you have here is a story of these men that go and explore this strange hole in this world that goes to nowhere. Inside the hole, they cannot describe what they saw. They have no mental capacity to describe what's inside that hole, but when they climb back out, they're flipped around. Some are flipped left, right, some are up, down, some have colors inverted, some are strange, and they're just not quite the right way around. And when asked what's inside, what's it like, the most sane person drew a map of an empty piece of paper and says this is a perfectly good map to where it was, because they literally left the book because, and I'll use this book as a bookmark, if you think about their world, their literary characters, they live on a piece of paper. If you were to, and if I can do this, punch a hole in that piece of paper, tear it out, so you got writing on this side, you can go in that way and then come back out the wrong way around. and be completely flipped out, inside, inverse, that sort of thing. And also you have no ability to describe what happens off of a piece of paper because your whole world is flat, which I think is actually a really big clue. One of the bigger ones, moving on from this book has all the good ones here. There's a story about a man named Christian. Now the story is actually on the page over here, but you're not going to be able to read all of this nonsense. And the previous League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because there's been like 10 different leagues and they've always protected Great Britain since like the beginning of time, but this fellow, Christian, is gone. This guy claimed to have been traveling in his world and accidentally fell into their world. No idea how he got there. They asked him where he's from. He said he's from Vanity Fair. If you're familiar with Vanity Fair, that's a magazine. He's described as being a very self-absorbed person, very calm. And as they traveled away from their world toward the Burning Lands, or the Burning Isles, which we'll talk about in a little bit, he saw Vanity Fair again and left for that. Like he hopped out of his book and into theirs. I thought Vanity Fair was an important one to mention because it's actually a real book, like somebody misplaced a magazine next to all the other ones. All right, I've been a little bit of a derp. I've said Burning Isles. The actual name is Blazing World. It's been a little bit since I've read the book, so Blazing World. Apologies for that. But again, the last clue is here near the end of the first book, or one of the better ones. As they travel and sail north on their little boat here, they sail through these giant letters that are being formed, adjectives, sounds, nouns, descriptions, people, places, things. They're being born, in a sense, and being personified here in this place. And they literally make those giant noises as they travel past. And they're physical, like they try not to crash on the letters. And it's a really big deal as they head toward the Blazing World, which is like the core. It's like the heaven, the peaceful place where everybody, all of these characters want to get to. They want to get to the Blazing World, and they have to travel through all these letters as if they're traveling through the letters in a library book or through maybe, say, a person's imagination. Now this is where it gets a little bit strange, as if it wasn't already strange to talk about people living in a book. The second book in this series is known as The Black Dossier, and it's incredibly difficult to read because it moves around a lot. But near the end of The Black Dossier, this is a spoiler, by the way, they finally do make it to the Blazing World. When you hit the Blazing World, if you see it, everything, they're really pushing this sort of 3D concept here all over the page, and you actually need 3D glasses, which are back here, in order to be able to read all the stuff. Yeah, they're kind of designed to make you look like a twat while you read. I did it on an airplane. While you read all of this stuff. And the idea is not only were they living in a library, but if they become popular enough, they transcend that library into more like human imagination. They become a figure of speech. They become a part of like what we are, our culture. They're becoming real things, even though they were once fictional. And you can kind of see that as they're in the Blazing World. People here, especially this little weird thing down here. This is a person, and as comical as this is, he's actually wrestling poetry. Not a poem monster, not a person with tattoos, but if you read all of the text, he's literally wrestling the thing that is poetry. And they're like, oh my God, he hit him with a metaphor. What a terrible simile. Oh no. Because they're transcending away from the library into our actual heads. And that, I think, is the core story behind all of these books. The other stuff is puffery or nonsense. It's ultimately a distraction because the characters, they're kind of witnessing the transformation of literature from the early 19th century to the 2000s, and it's the story about what stays and what goes, what will transcend being a book and become a figure of our speech, a part of our imagination, kind of like Shakespeare. And one of the biggest clues to this is actually not in these books. If you get on Wikipedia and you read about the author, which I'll reference as Alan Moore again, I said he was crazy. He also wrote John Constantine, like the Constantine TV show. It's often pronounced Constantine. I think his was Constantine. Anyway, we'll say Constantine. It's a little bit more popular. He believes that he met John Constantine in person after he started writing the book. Not once, but twice. Once on the street at random and once at a pub. He literally believes that the imaginary character that he wrote about that deals in magic and stuff like that is a real person that has crossed worlds to come and meet him a couple of times, because he believes that what you write can become real in that sense, and that is the story of these books. And I don't know of anybody else who's had this idea. I know it's complex, I know it's a little weird and strange, but I think that's actually what's happening here, and everything else is kind of a distraction. Guys, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If it was confusing, comic book fans will probably appreciate this. The rest of you are going to be like, Drifter, what in the hell have you been smoking? Because I got to get some. These are fantastic comic books. Even though they're very difficult to read, they're definitely not for kids. I did put Amazon links down there in the description because I'm shameless if you're interested in them. This one's the first one, by the way. Definitely read it first. And let me know what you think. Let me know if you think this theory is valid or bogus, or if I've hit the nail on the head or totally missed down there in the comments. Drifter out.